That's okay.
Now I'm putting you on full screen.
Okay.
All right. So I gave them a little background about your role and what you're going to talk to us about today. So is there anything else that you wanted from us before you start to share?
Grade levels.
Oh, yes. Okay. Everyone want to go around and say their grade level so Brian can see you and share again.
Fourth.
Fifth. Reading specialist, 4 through 6.
Third. First.
Fourth.
Fifth.
Awesome.
Okay. Good?
Yes.
Okay. I also, before you share, just have to tell you that whatever's hanging behind you looks like you have these really fun antlers. Yes. You're in the perfect placement for it. Oh, man. Okay. All right. Then
It's
you
my wife's decorations.
Oh, well, I like them. They're good antlers.
Yeah.
You can go ahead then whenever you're ready. I'll turn you so you can see the class. Most of them.
Okay.
It'll catch up.
Oh, something. Okay. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, you just froze on our big screen. But
Okay.
You're good. Just keep going.
All right. So one of my favorite nonfiction and fiction stories is, in my class, we always did a Mustache Monday, which is, I taught kindergarten, and this is when I taught kindergarten. And so, one of my objectives was to teach the difference between what is fiction and what is nonfiction. And so on another one of my objectives was also to teach questions so that my students wouldn't raise their hand and say, I have a question, or be on a field trip and they say, do you have any questions? And they say, yes, my dog likes dog food. Or something random like that was nowhere close to a question. So we always did Mustache Mondays where we would mustache you a question. So all of my little kindergartners would put on these little tattoo mustaches right here. And so at the end of the year, it was around April or whatever, and so we were talking about spring. And I had a girl, Maritza, and Maritza was way more concerned with fashion than she was anything educationally. If you got a new pair of shoes, Maritza was the first one to notice them. And so I was reading a book called Everything Spring by Jill Esbaum. And it's a beautiful book. And it just talks about chickens hatching and all that stuff. And it's a great nonfiction book. And so I was reading it, and I got to the end, and I said, is this book fiction or nonfiction? And, raise your hand if you think this book is nonfiction. And everybody raised their hand except for Maritza. And I said, okay, so what makes you think this book is fiction? And she said, oh, you just asked me a question, and put her finger right there. And I thought, okay, she's got something from this year other than everybody's new shoes. And so she said, the pig and the baby piglets in the book said squeal, and they squealed instead of went oink. And that was her case for it was a fiction book, because that's not what pigs say. She knew that pigs said oink. And so I thought, yes, she knows fiction and nonfiction, and she knows what a question is. So that's one of my favorite stories about fiction and nonfiction, because it just, when they get it, they really start dissecting every little thing in that book and figuring out if this is true or not based on their experiences and what they know. So I've got, underneath my table, I've got a ton of books. So I thought I would just start with a couple. So there was a third grade teacher and some fourth grade teachers. So I don't know if y'all ever, do y'all do wax museums in your schools for biographies?
Mm-hmm.
Do any of y'all do wax museums?
We've got some head nodding if you can't see, but yes.
I can't.
Oh, okay.
So this series of nonfiction books, it's by Brad Metzer. It's the I Am. It's really called the Ordinary People Change the World series. And so they're in hardback. And the Lucille Ball one comes out today, which is very, very exciting. I saw a couple preview pages of it, and it looks great. These are fantastic. Let They're $12.99 at your Barnes and Noble or wherever. But I have begged and begged and begged. See, the illustrations are great, but it's all nonfiction, and it basically takes something from the child's life, from when the people were little, and turns it into why they became great leaders. But Scholastic reading clubs just got them in paperback, so you can get a couple of them in paperback for like $2. But there's also Albert Einstein. Lucille Ball, Jackie Robinson came out in January. So, but Abraham Lincoln was the first one, and it's probably one of my favorites. But those are great if you do like those wax museums, because they're easy to read, and because they're written kind of like a graphic novel. Kids become a little obsessed with them, and they can't get enough nonfiction information. And it's a great way because it tells a story linearly, whatever that word is. Kids really, and they start reading all of them in the series. So I'm glad that the series is starting to expand. There's probably maybe 6 of them now. I'm sure that a lot of y'all have these in your classroom, the National Geographic books.
More head nodding, you're good.
I see one head nod. So, and you've got different levels depending on, what I wish they would do is do different levels of the same thing so that you would have different reading levels in your classroom and kids could be independent. So there would be almost like a level 1 frog and then a level 3 frog. And that way, depending on your kid's reading level. But that doesn't happen yet. I'm working on it. So my kids like to look at these. I don't necessarily use these a lot to teach with because they tend to be a little wordy, and they're from Scholastic, and so I really should be like, oh, I love them, but I kind of don't. But they are great to have out, so I don't use them in lessons. But it's something that I have on my shelf in my classroom library. Now, I will be honest with all of you. My classroom library, my system is called the hot mess. And so basically what that means is I just shove stuff on a shelf, and we roll from there. So I don't have cute little book boxes. I will tell you, let's see if I can find it really quick. One of the things that I have done that I do absolutely love, and it's great for classrooms, and I've got several examples I'll show you. I don't know if y'all can see this. This is called Shelf Discovery, and it's something that I created. And you could also do like a whole wall. So I'm going to be doing that, and I'll blog about this later. But I start with one book that I read aloud. And so this is obviously a fiction Shelf Discovery. But so I read aloud Bad Case of Stripes. And so then what I did was I would go ahead and put also other things up. So if they like the fact that the character changes colors, find this book on my bookshelf, Changing the Mixed Up Chameleon. That also changes colors. So if that's the part of this book that you like the most, then kind of move on to there. If you really like the illustrations, which, I mean, who doesn't, because it's David Shannon and he's amazing, then try this book. It's How I Became a Pirate, and it's the same illustrator. So you might really like that. So it kind of gives kids suggestions for where to go, and you could easily do this with nonfiction as well. If you like the fact that that the lesson was to be yourself, then Giraffes Can't Dance is another great book about being yourself. And so the great thing about it is it can kind of grow. And so when a kid finds a book on your bookshelf, if it's on your shelf discovery wall, then what they do is they'll go find it, and then they'll look around it, and those are all other books that they might really enjoy, fiction or nonfiction. And that way they kind of continue to grow their love of reading. And so this is the same author, The Rain Came Down, but then this is also a cause and effect book. So if you like that because it started raining, the chicken started squawking, and the dog started barking, and the baby woke up, then you also might like if you give a mouse a cookie. So obviously this is more for my kindergarten classroom. If you like the fact that she needed to eat lima beans, that you thought the lima bean twist was really cool in Bad Case of Stripes, this is another one. It's a Love of Food book. It's Dragons Love Tacos, which is a great book if you don't know it. And then if you like dragons, this is Me and My Dragon. So it's a shelf discovery, which this one incorporates some nonfiction as well. This is a great second, third, fourth grade book. Oh No, How My Science Experiment Almost Destroyed the World. If y'all don't know that one, it's Mac Barnett. He is really, really popular right now. He's putting out a lot of great work. Same author is Battle Bunny. Now, honestly, if you don't know this book, and I know this is a nonfiction talk, but this is a fiction book. But what they did was this book was called Birthday Bunny, and they created a whole book called Birthday Bunny. And then they went back and they acted like they were kids, and they changed everything. Like they drew. It's a great book to teach editing. And so then they changed Birthday Bunny into Battle Bunny. And so you read the book as Birthday Bunny first because you can still see all the words, and then you read it as Battle Bunny and they can see like, oh, I totally took this story and changed it, and that's what editing is. It's a fantastic book. Scholastic just had it for $2 in May, so it still may be on their website relatively cheap. But that's the same author, Mac Barnett. The same illustrator is Dan Santat. He did Beagle, which won the Caldecott this year, so I don't know if you know Beagle. But he also did Picture Day Perfection, which is a great book. But up here is the I Am series because it's got a strong female character. So if you like the fact that this was a strong female character, you might also like to read about Amelia Earhart. So that's how nonfiction is kind of tying into this shelf discovery. Does that make sense? And then the same series as you have Abraham Lincoln up here. And then you end up in the wordless picture books up here. And then you can also do it just real quick with chapter books as well. So I started with The Mighty Miss Malone, which is a great Christopher Paul Curtis book. And then Maniac McGee, Judy Blume, Fish in a Tree, which is about dyslexia, One and Only Ivan. So you can see it's called Shelf Discovery. So I think y'all have a link to the Scholastic blog, so it'll be on there. I'm hoping that I can have that as one of my August or September posts. So one of the problems a lot of times with nonfiction books is the hook. It can be really hard for kids to totally get into a nonfiction book because they're really used to stories. Like when we think about bedtime stories, they're always fiction stories or made-up stories or whatever. And so it's that hook. So when you can come up with a hook, so like this is, they have a lot of big books of why. I tend to think these are great books also for older grades just because it's quick introductions, and there are some fun facts in here. This is about the ocean. And so when I introduced this quick book, I showed a quick clip of, when I introduced this book, I showed a quick clip from Finding Nemo, where Dory talks about the whale only eating krill, and, oh, no worry. And then all of a sudden she goes, oh, look, krill. And the krill swim by, and then they get swallowed by the whale. You know what I'm talking about in that movie? And so then I say, who knows what krill is? Well, most kids don't truly understand what krill is. And so I say, well, look, guys, nonfiction book is the perfect place because here's a whole 2-page section on krill. And so, and then you just put it up. And that's one of the beautiful things about it is it's getting them into those nonfiction texts. You're just dropping that little hint like, hey, this is a question you might have always had because everybody's seen Finding Nemo. But here's how you find the answer. And I'm just going to show you it's in there, and I'm not going to teach it. And so come to me if you have any questions after you read it, and we'll talk about it. But that kind of, the other thing, but these big books of, the other thing I want to mention, I'm glad I took some notes. The other thing I want to mention about these first things is it's also, like they're like every other nonfiction book. So there's a table of contents. In the back, there's a map, like you see on standardized tests where you have to answer questions about it. And so it's got a full color map, and it lists where it's coming. So you could create graphs or charts, or, you know, you could create questions based on this. And so there's got a glossary. You know, it's not a thick glossary, but a lot of times glossaries and index and all those things can be very overwhelming for a kid. So these are great books to kind of start out with. And then it's also got the index where you can go and look and say, oh, the krill page mentioned something about, you know, the kind of whale. So let's look. Oh, okay, we need to go to page 103 for the blubber whale. So another one in that series is the first big book of why, and it covers a lot of different things. A fun thing about this book, you can do a scavenger hunt with it. You could do a scavenger hunt with a lot of these books. You know, you could do those with this series that I don't love. But, you know, spread out a reading level, all of the ones. Let's see. Starts with dinosaurs and frogs. So, you know, spread out all of the one reading level. So the frogs, spiders, ponies, and dinosaurs. And then you go through, write up 5-10 questions real quick, and they've got to figure out which animal kind of fits. And they're looking in those nonfiction books in a very fun and informative way. And, you know, then you've got your other reading group, you know, your higher readers, give them the twos. Do the same thing with the twos, where they're learning about dolphins, pandas, and penguins. And it just gets them in that nonfiction book. Let's see what else I have down here. Fly Guy, another great, he's a character, especially for the first grade teacher. I think I see you in green, right? You taught first grade? Do your kids love Fly Guy? So he has a whole nonfiction series. We brainstormed in May at Scholastic, because these sell really, really well for Scholastic. And they're cheap in the catalogs. Like one, you can get them sometimes as a $1 book, $2, $3. But he covers all kinds of things. So I just did a brainstorming session about what else he could do. And I was like, you know, do volcanoes and all kinds of, because they're tending more towards science, but I wanted them to go a little more towards social studies, because a lot of times social studies is the hard part to get into our curriculum, right? So these are really well. They are also looking at doing this kind of, and they're starting to come out, different characters. So be on the lookout. Like, go to your kids section and say, what are my class's favorite characters? Are there any nonfiction books there? Do you have any questions?
Any questions yet? No. You're good so far.
Okay. For the older grades, this coral reef, this rainforest, they are by Picture Window Books. And you can find them at www.picturewindowbooks.com. They have a lot of, I don't really love the illustrations on them that much, but it's a lot of great information for kids to have. Let me see if I can. So, you know, obviously this is for the older grades. So, rainforest and coral reef. So the picture window books are pretty good. Oh, Have you all seen this line of books? You wouldn't want to work, or you wouldn't want to live, or that kind of stuff. Do you all know that line of books? So this one is, you wouldn't want to work on the Great Wall of China. So there's a whole series. It's also designed for older kids, but it's written in a way, it's got some word bubbles. I'm telling you, word bubbles are magic. If you can find a nonfiction book with some word bubbles, like, the kids just eat it up, because it feels like they're cheating, that they're not really reading, that it's more of a cartoon, and you got them. But this is a great series for older kids. So, like, this graphic itself, like, this is what will hook them. You show them that, just drop the hint about what the Great Wall of China was or whatever, put this on your shelf, you'll have kids reading it because it looked fun. And I know, not everything has to be fun, but it doesn't hurt when something is. Capstone Press does a whole series, a whole bunch of books. These are great K1, second grade. I think I didn't really hear second grade, I don't think. Maybe 1 second grade. But the first grade, the Capstone Press, if you'll look them up, it's capstonepub.com, capstonepublishing.com. But they'll sell them as a series. Online, PebbleGo is a great place. I don't know if y'all have access to PebbleGo or not, but PebbleGo is a website, and it's a nonfiction website, and it does read aloud, and it's got great facts or whatever. And so these, and it's by Capstone, and so these are the books, and so you can see it's a Pebble Plus book on the corner right here. So, but these are great books. They give a lot of great information. How I always use nonfiction books in my class is I would read a fiction book first, and then I would bring in the nonfiction book. I've always found that to hook the group, because it's really hard to use great voices and be dramatic with a nonfiction book read aloud, right? You kind of end up being dry and sounding like you are on NPR. But you find a great fiction book, you read it, and then at any level, and then you bring in that nonfiction book, and they start asking questions, and that nonfiction book is where you go to get the answers, and it works great. There's a couple. Now, there's a whole new line of books that are nonfiction based, but they look fiction-y, and I love that. This one I got around Earth Day from a publisher. I think it's out now. If it's not, it's coming out really soon. But this one would work for every grade level in that room. It's called Luna and Me, and it's about a girl who saved a tree. She named the tree Luna. Julia Butterfly Hill. It's a true story, and it's written as a true story. Like, there's no fiction parts to it, but it's her true story. And so for retelling, to remember facts, anytime you can connect a nonfiction book to a real story or something, it connects to an experience. This is more of an experience than, say, an encyclopedia. So they will remember this, and then you can work on that retell from nonfiction angles as well. And then you take it and you delve even deeper. But this is a great book. So you could actually start with this book because it looks and presents like a fiction book, but it's a nonfiction story. Does that make sense? Then you could talk about other people who have sat in trees and find news articles online and print them off and say, read this and let's compare it to Julia Butterfly Hill and all that stuff. But this is a great book. Give me a second, and I'll tell you if it's out yet or not. Yes, it went on sale May 12th. So it's out there. Another one is called The Tree Lady, and this is about a lady in San Diego. She planted like hundreds of trees. Y'all changed my view on me.
I know, I'm sorry.
Sorry about that.
You got really tiny on the screen. We had to fix you. All right, you're back.
But her name was Kate, and she grew up, and so there's a whole Balboa Park in San Diego. If you need to do a research project on a part of the country, I think. And my daughter just graduated. You don't graduate fourth grade. You finish fourth grade if you're lucky. She had to learn the different parts of the country. So I wish we would have had this book when we had to do the West, because she could have done her project on Balboa Park in San Diego and used this book as the reference. But it looks just like a fiction book, so it already has that appeal for the kids to go, oh, this is like every other book I know, except it's a true story. So there's another book down here I want to make sure I show you, because my wife was none too happy that all these books are on our living room floor. So upper grades. Are any of y'all, I don't know your curriculum very well, the Underground Railroad, slavery, does anybody in the room have to talk about that?
Yeah.
Okay. So this book is a, Katie, you have this book, right?
Yes, I love it. It's amazing.
It's a great nonfiction. To me, it's a nonfiction book. Would you agree, Katie?
Yeah. It doesn't have words, so I think you can count it.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a wordless picture book about the Underground Railroad. We've got to find ways to introduce our kids to these nonfiction books in non-threatening ways. This is one of those ways. You put this out, or you can talk about it as a class, or you can just put it out and have them kind of go through and figure. But Henry Cole did a great job with this book. The illustrations are beautiful, and literally the only words that I have found in it is on the wanted poster towards the end, when they come looking for the escaped slaves. And that's not even like you have to really look at it, like you can't. So he did a wonderful job of doing a nonfiction book as a wordless picture book. And there's more out there. Let's see. For the younger grades, this is another great. It looks like a nonfiction. It looks like a fiction book, but it's a nonfiction book. It's a true story of lucky ducklings, where they fall into a water grate and they save them. Spoiler alert! Too late, evidently. So there's also other series. Once again, Scholastic. Scholastic does do a great job with books. Science vocabulary readers that cover everything from the different kinds of houses to the different kind of houses of animals to different animals. And then you also have they are starting to do a whole lot of nonfiction math books. So for the younger grades, again, like Shapes and Patterns, some nonfiction books. But for the older groups, they have this Measure in Time series. It's an Acorn book. So for math, introduce that nonfiction text in math. Talk about hours, minutes, months of the year, clocks and calendars, seasons of the year. So they look older than what they really are for. But there's a great one if you have elapsed time in your math curriculum, which in North Carolina it's third grade-ish. Is that about it in Pennsylvania?
Yes.
It's called Time Flies, and it's all about the time zones. And so kids are fascinated by it. We just went to Guatemala last week, and it's only a 2-hour time difference. If my kid said jet lag one time, she said it a million. Like, I was ready to jet lag her myself. But I mean, you would have thought she had lost 27 hours and had no idea what. It's just 2 hours, baby. Like, it's not that big a deal. Like 2 hours you get that night. But time zone. So we really looked at this book when we came home. But it's got the history of the time zones. Goes back to George Washington and clock. It's a great book. And this is a true Scholastic book. So you get that there. It's by David Adler. Another series that I love, and there's another book I wanted to show, is What If You? Do y'all know these books? A lot of grade levels can use those. It really is a research book, but in a very fun and creative way. Once again, great illustrations that make it look fiction-like. But you're really learning about, this one is about what if you had animal feet. And so it's the different kinds of animals and how they use their feet. There's also what if you had animal teeth and animal hair. And so I think there's 3 in the series now. I always use these in February because I bring in the teeth one first during dental hygiene month. In kindergarten, you have to celebrate all that silly stuff. So I bring in the teeth one in dental hygiene month, and then I bring out the other 2. The kids cannot get enough of these. Y'all went really fuzzy. Am I fuzzy to y'all?
No, you're still good.
Okay.
Okay.
Y'all are very fuzzy. This book, do you teach the water cycle?
Yes.
Okay. This is a brand new book. Hold on, let me tell you when it comes out. It maybe is already out. It might have come out in May. Let's see. I lost the paper. They always send me a paper with the release date. It came out May 26th, so they put it on the back. It's called Water is Water. It's a great water cycle book. And as you can see, once again, like, it's not real pictures. Real pictures will tend to scare off a kid, and we've kind of hit on that. And so it's written in great terms, but it still covers the water cycle. And it kind of breaks it down. It breaks it down very, very nicely, but it very much is a nonfiction book. Water is Water by Miranda Paul. And this one I think I got from Macmillan. Yeah. So it's at mackids.com. I think is where you can find that one. Any questions? What do y'all need from me that I haven't? I do want to say you can do Find the Fib. That is a great game to play with nonfiction text. And so what would happen is, so in kindergarten, we even played in kindergarten, but you can adapt it to any grade level. So we would start my year out by reading Clark the Shark. I don't know if you know him, by Bruce Hale, but it's a great character. And then we would learn about sharks, because Shark Week is always, Shark Week is going on right now on Discovery or National Geographic or whatever channel that is, Animal Planet. And so my kids were very much into sharks when they started kindergarten. And so we would start with Clark the Shark, and then we would do Find the Fib. And so what that is I would call out different facts about sharks, and they would have to go and look in some of these books. Where's my shark book? Evidently, the only thing I brought was about dolphins, because there's about 75 different dolphin books underneath my table. But there's some shark books in this series and a couple of other series, and so I get those out, and I would give 2 facts about sharks, and they would have to find which one was the fib. And so they're doing that research. And of course, at the beginning of kindergarten, it's more about the pictures because they're not readers. But for yours, that first day, you could do a Find the Fib activity for whatever you wanted to introduce first, and get them, get them in that nonfiction mode from day one with the Find the Fib. And, 5, 10 different questions, have each group determine like A or B is the question, and have them hold up a little sign that says A or B, and you've got a great activity there where they are in the nonfiction text doing the research and not really realizing it.
Excellent.
So,
did you have more you wanted to share, or did you want us to ask questions and give you some feedback?
I would love some questions.
Okay, hold on. Michael's got one.
For struggling readers, one of the problems that I find with a lot of nonfiction books is that the text is all over the place. And so a struggling reader has a very difficult time making sense of the information in there because it's in bubbles, it's placed in different ways and that kind of thing. Are you seeing a trend away from that, or are you still seeing a lot of nonfiction books being published in that sort of a format?
They are not going to get away from that anytime soon, I don't think, because it looks more like graphic novels. And right now, graphic novels are the it thing. Like, they've just started winning awards, and they are big, big sellers. That graphic novel section is really booming. They can't get enough graphic novels fast enough. And so they're making those nonfiction texts look more like that, yes. So, you know, part of that's going to be what draws the kids in. But you're right, it can be very difficult for them to piece that information together. So that's where that quick mini lesson comes in about what do these word bubbles mean? How do you use those word bubbles? They support the text. They aren't the text a lot of times. Do y'all know the series Who Was, Who Were?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Those tend to be, you know, they look a little more graphic novelish, but they don't. I don't remember them having a lot of those word bubbles and stuff. It's a little more straightforward text and chapters. And so, were you 4th or 5th grade?
4, 5, and 6.
Okay. Oh yeah, you're the reading specialist. So, you know, those might be some of the ones that you want to pull in because they tend to be more 3rd, 4th grade written. I did a boys' book club this past year, and a lot of them were nonfiction or fiction books that we read each month, and then we would bring in the nonfiction articles and stuff about the people we had read about. But one of the books that we read was What Was the March on Washington, and that was the book they read in February, and we talked about it in March. And it was fantastic, and they got so much from that. The other piece of that is to make that and they really wanted more in the series after we did that. But what I would do at book club is we would talk about it, and if you can I had 18 third grade boys. They gave up 3 hours one Saturday a month to come and talk about books. So we would talk about the book for one whole hour, and then we would have themed snacks. So in the book, they talk about how when they did the March on Washington, they had different kinds of sandwiches and cherry cobbler, and so that was our snack that week. And then we actually met on the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday in Selma, Alabama, and so we brought in that piece a little bit, and then they built bridges out of popsicle sticks. And so, like, they worked for 3 solid hours, and they don't want to go home. Like, they are not finished, and, you know, but we did all kinds of things this year, but that was the nonfiction book that we read, and that was probably one of several of their favorite months. It was hard to beat the Building Volcanoes month when we did I Survived the Destruction of Pompeii by Lauren Tarshish. They love building volcanoes, but that was another favorite month. I actually had kids, these 3rd grade boys. I remember one, his name was Adric, and so we watched an actual video clip of Bloody Sunday when we kind of brought that piece into it and the civil rights movement, and like, he started crying. I mean, you know, there was this gospel singer in the background singing a very slow, low song. So it was an emotional piece, and it's emotional anyway, but he started crying, and then, like, there was a couple others that didn't full-on cry but got teary-eyed, and Adric had to leave. And I was like, oh, Lord, I'm going to get in trouble now. Like, I've already had the kid crying. And he came back in about 5 minutes later, and I was like, are you okay? And he said, yeah, I had to go watch a funny cat video. Okay. Whatever. That's a 3rd grade boy. But I find that series tends to have less. It still has the same look, which they get excited about, but it has less of the word bubbles and stuff and more chapters. Did that help?
Yes, very much so. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Any other questions?
I teach first grade, and I do pretty much what you were saying, how I teach the fiction first and then the nonfiction. But I was wondering if you had any suggestions for the retelling pieces for first grade. It's kind of similar to what Michael was saying, like there's a lot of information there and you can't make sense of the sequencing. Do you have any suggestions for retelling the nonfiction?
Could you repeat? Could somebody closer to the microphone repeat that? Sorry.
She'll come over closer. That's okay.
Okay. I didn't want to interrupt her because she was obviously talking.
I teach first grade, and I teach the fiction before I teach the nonfiction, just like you said. And I was wondering if you had any suggestions for retelling the nonfiction, like similar along the lines of what Michael was saying. There's not really a linear progress through the story. It's just kind of all information. So I didn't know if you had any ideas or suggestions for the retelling piece.
So you're wanting them to retell facts?
They have to with our curriculum,
Right.
For nonfiction. So not necessarily. I guess I just need like some kind of structure for them to retell.
So I'll start with books like this,
Okay.
where it is like real life, and it's somebody's life, but there is a linear progression.
Okay.
So like Abraham Lincoln, he's all the time reading. It talks about the libraries, and then it talks about him saving a turtle. They played these horrible turtle games, evidently back in the day. I mean, who knew? Start with this kind of book to get them in the mindset of retelling when they read something that's real. So if you find books like that, then you can pull the real meat and the facts from it, because it is in a linear sequence, because that's where their little brains are at, especially in first grade. They're still developing that linear sequence. And so when we throw things at them that doesn't have a linear sequence, their little brains kind of go, poof, because for the first 7 years of their life, we're like, this is the beginning and the middle and the end. And then we throw these nonfiction books at them, and there's no beginning, middle, and end, and it's really hard. So if we can slide them into nonfiction with books that still have a beginning, middle, and end, and you don't have to get into slavery and all that stuff. I mean, with first grade, like you can use that with the upper grades, but this is a nonfiction book that still is linear. So look for those kind of books, and then start pulling the facts out of that. And so then when you read a book like this, where it is just kind of series of facts and it's not beginning, middle, and end, they will have practiced. Does that make sense?
Any other questions? All right, I think we're good on questions here. Anything else
Awesome.
you wanted to share? You did an awesome job of giving us lots to consider and research and check out now.
Yeah, we really appreciate. Not only did you give us like a gazillion resources, but you gave us some teaching implications as well. So very much appreciated.
Perfect. If
Thank you.
I did what y'all wanted me to do, I'm happy.
You're good. Yes, thank you.
Have a great day.
Yeah, thank you, Brian.
Thank
Thank
you.
Bye.
You hear them?
They clapped.
Bye.
See ya.